Let's start, though, with the big story, and it is that game I was talking about, Wisconsin and Notre Dame at Soldier Field in Chicago. First time these two have met since 1964. First time they played in the Windy City since 1929, 10 days before the stock market crashed. Both teams ranked in the top 20, though I think it's fair to say neither has totally lived up to preseason expectations. The Badgers are 1-1. The Irish are 3-0. Well, let's take a look at the tail of the tape here. And look, neither of these teams is going to overwhelm you offensively. The Irish have really struggled to run it. The Badgers maybe a little limited through the air. Wisconsin, the far stingier defense, though Notre Dame has been opportunistic, forcing turnovers. And we have seen the Badgers make some critical errors in that area early on this year, particularly in the red zone against Penn State. Anthony, before we really break this game down, what do you think the significance of it is for Wisconsin? How big a game is this for the Badgers?
Well, I believe it's an opportunity coming off of a bye week for Wisconsin to sort of reset the perception of their season right now. You know, even though losing to Penn State is really, that's nothing to be embarrassed about in the least, but the way it happened, the limits of the offense, the excitement that was there for Graham Mertz that hasn't completely rounded into form yet. I think all those things having an opportunity to sort of reset over a bye week, albeit an early bye week. You know, most coaches would prefer it to not go that early in the season, but it was there. And going into this particular matchup is probably a good thing because there's some things that Notre Dame's defense will throw at Graham Mertz, at that Wisconsin pass protection, that it'll help them to have a few extra days to get ready for. But I think sort of globally for the program, it's a nice opportunity for them to sort of lick a few maybe mental wounds and make sure schematically they are where they want to be.
I do think the timing is really interesting. We had Paul Christ on earlier this week and asked him a little bit about it. And Paul Christ is the last guy on planet Earth who's going to make any excuses, right? He's just going to say, well, it's a good opportunity, a chance to get better. And that's just how he is. It's how he's wired. And I think it actually helps him quite a bit because I don't think he gets too high or too low.
Yeah.
But I do think you would initially look at that schedule and say, man, that is just too early for your only bye of the year. But I think given what happened against Penn State, given that they had a lot of things to clean up and then had a little bit lesser opponent, you know, frankly, the next week, I do think that this is good timing for them because this is a big game. It can set the tone. You're still in the college football playoff hunt.
Right.
You know, one loss out of a league like this, you'd be fine. But their margin for error has completely disappeared. And so in that sense, this is a game that they really need to win if you're going to stay on that college football playoff radar. The other really interesting storyline is the quarterbacks, right? You have Jack Coan, who played extremely well 2 years ago for Wisconsin. They got hurt in the preseason last year. Graham Mertz, as we know, incredibly highly recruited. And then he took over, and Coan realized that he wasn't going to play. In fact, told them during the season last year, hey, it looks like Mertz is going to be the guy. I'm going to transfer, but he was a great teammate going forward. And then you see what Mertz has done. I mean, he hasn't thrown a touchdown pass this year. Last 7 games, he has 2 touchdown passes and 7 interceptions. Coan's been really good. People are going to make a lot about this. Well, Wisconsin could have had Jack Coan, and now they have Graham Mertz. To me, they did what anyone would do, right? You had a quarterback get hurt. You have a guy who's next in line, and you're honest with Jack Coan and say it's probably going to be Graham. And, you know, he's got more time here on his clock. And I think all that makes sense. But, man, it's an interesting storyline on a lot of levels.
I've enjoyed on Big Ten Radio talking about it as the Jack Coan revenge game because it's a fun portion of the storyline. And who knows, you know, maybe Jack Coan doesn't directly view it in that manner. And, you know, the relationships he still has there in Madison, he's talked about it, his teammates have talked about it, and certainly Paul Christ has spoken very highly of Jack Coan and what he did. And you mentioned being a great teammate. That being said, I know as a competitor, if I were Jack Coan, I want to go out there and light up the Wisconsin Badgers, man. I mean, that's the squad that chose some other guy in my position instead of me. So just sheerly from a competitive perspective, even if it's just that friendly competition, if he goes out there and lights them up for 4 tugs and no INTs, he's going to feel great about that.
I hear you. I mean, one thing I would say is, well, first of all, he's a wildly popular teameate, right? And you alluded to it. I mean, those guys love him. In Madison, there are guys who went to South Bend to help him move into his apartment. I mean, that's how much these guys like Jack Coan. And you could see last year, I mean, how involved he was not just when Mertz was playing, but then when Chase Wolf was forced into action, how much he mentored him.
Yeah.
So it's clear that everyone likes him. I agree with you. This notion
if you and I play checkers off camera and I win, I'm going to chide you about it for years, Dave. I'm not going to let you forget about it. You know, that's just how it goes, man. But competitive checkers.
Again, I hear you. I think it's a little bit of a false narrative that they chose Coan just because I think their hand was kind of forced a little bit, right?
No, it wasn't. Jack Coan got healthy during that season, and they left Graham Mertz in the lineup. Now, they didn't tell Jack Coan to transfer, but they did choose to start Graham Mertz over him. I'm not saying it was the wrong choice, but you start one quarterback, they chose Graham Mertz. I'm not saying it was the wrong choice, but they chose Mertz, and Jack Coan made what for him was the best decision to leave, and he has this opportunity with Notre Dame. That doesn't mean anyone's the bad guy in this scenario, but they made a decision.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Here's where I think it's really interesting, and I asked Paul about this as well on Monday. Jack Coan knows Wisconsin's defense. I mean, he knows it really well. I mean, he's practiced against it, and this is where Wisconsin hangs its hat on defense. So how much of an advantage is that for Coan, that he does know what they do, that he's gone against these guys, that not only does he know what they do strategically, X and O, he knows personnel very well, too.
Yeah, I think all those things matter. And the way that Jack Coan, I think, can try to communicate some of that to his teammates will matter. How he communicates it to his pass protection, his offensive line, all those things will matter as well. I got to think back to my rookie year. I got released by the Detroit Lions, and the next opponent the Lions had, actually was the opening opponent the Lions had, was the Green Bay Packers. I got picked up by the Packers like right away when they saw me hit the waiver wire. I'm in Green Bay drawing stuff up on the board. You know, I had barely met the defensive staff, but I got a room full of the Packers offensive coaches in the room, and I'm drawing up the formations when Detroit lines up like this and they stem here. Here's what's happening with this Joker package. So I'm sure some of that.
Did the Packers win?
Yes, throttled them. We were at Lambeau Field. Detroit showed up. This is 2001. I don't remember what the final score was. Go ahead and look it up. Maybe tweet it at me if you want that big Ant Herron. But yes, it was a resounding victory for Green Bay. That only matters to a certain extent, though, because still, like the reason Green Bay beat Detroit that day is because Green Bay had Brett Favre and a bunch of better personnel.
You don't think it was just Anthony Herron?
I don't think it was only the work that I did on the video board.
Fair enough. You always sell yourself short, though.
Exactly. I know. It was obviously my acumen. But I do think the personnel will end up being the thing that tells the tale here. But knowing pre-snap for a quarterback, like Jack Coan's very experienced, obviously, but when you got a defense that does some movement, some stem, some disguise, like Jim Leonard's defense at Wisconsin does, and then you have that ability as a quarterback to hear certain catchphrases, certain coverages that are being checked to that unless they've changed the verbiage, Jack Coan heard that for years, and he's an extremely intelligent individual, so he'll hear things that'll just, tip him off to something in his head. Now, maybe they've adjusted. Maybe they're saying something to see if they can trick him, but then it's that I know that you know. So some of that I do believe matters, but in the end, it will still be the personnel.
Okay, so could you mess with them? I mean, what about the flip side of it? I mean, could you – look, Wisconsin plays how they play. It's incredibly successful on defense. Right. It's a fabulous defense. Now, they're a little depleted in the secondary.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an area of concern, right? Because we know, look, Notre Dame doesn't run the ball very well. And Wisconsin's arguably the best running defense in the country. Statistically, they are at this point. So a lot of it's going to go on Jack's shoulders in terms of the Notre Dame offense. What about the flip side? I mean, how about Wisconsin's familiarity with Coan and his tendencies? How about the possibility of doing things a little differently, about changing some terminology to do things that you think might mess with them? I mean, how much of this is this? You were talking checkers. I'll talk chess. How much of it is this chess match of where maybe you make some changes just to get into his head?
I see what you did there. Well played.
Yeah.
I do think that because they've had the bye week, there's more time to bake a little bit of that into their defensive package. Like I think when Sandberg's gonna rush the edge, if he's gonna come through the A gap versus rushing the edge off the C gap, if he's gonna be a guy who's blitzing from one look versus another look, if the coverage check is rolling in a certain way, because they know Jack Coan, and perhaps even on the practice field, there have been moments where because he's heard something in the past and they've had like some jovial moments as teammates where, I heard you say this and I knew it meant this coverage. And if they recognize that, then maybe they bake a bit of that in because they had the additional time to prepare for the game. I don't think it's going to be a big focus, but because they know him, if there are things where they know in the meeting room or on the practice field that have come up that he just has within his subconscious somewhere, that he knows it like the back of his hand, then yeah, there's a chance they'll change a few things verbally that they wouldn't necessarily need to change against a different quarterback and a different offense.
What ultimately determines this game?
I think the way that Jack Sanborn can end up rushing the quarterback. I mean, you talked about the run defense, and Notre Dame certainly wants to rush the quarterback and rush the football, and Wisconsin wants to hit blocks, stop the run, and put themselves in predictable downs and distances to get after the quarterback. So that's going to end up being huge. Jack Coan has been up and down. I mean, he's been Jack Coan. He's had some really good moments so far in a few games and started for Notre Dame. They're also rotating, was it Tyler Buckner, a young quarterback?
Yeah, they really like him too. And he has a very different dimension.
Right, and we're going to talk Ohio State in a little bit. I think when you're looking at the rotation at quarterback, part of that is because they're excited about the freshmen, and they don't necessarily see apparently as wide a margin between what Jack Coan brings to the table and what Tyler Buckner brings to the table, so they want him in the mix. That being said, Jack Coan's not immobile. For a guy his size, he moves well also. I think he'll have to be on the move because Wisconsin's pass rush, if they get him in first and second down and limit their run game, they can get after the quarterback as well as anyone. So I do think that that's going to tell the tale. Who can control which run game? I anticipate Wisconsin's run game will have success. I really like what Chez Mellusi has brought to the table for them through just a couple of games. He runs angry, and I love it. I thought Jalen Berger was going to be the guy who emerged so far, but I hadn't watched much of Chez Mellusi, but I'm really impressed with what he does. So they do have at least a 1-2 combination. I anticipate Wisconsin running the ball. If they limit Notre Dame's rushing attack, I think it's going to be a hard day for the Irish.
I love Isaac Guerendo getting healthy, too. Yeah. I mean, he may be the fastest guy on that team, and we saw last week, or 2 weeks ago, he can be a home run hitter for them. So now all of a sudden, that run game, I know they don't have one guy. They don't have Jonathan Taylor, but you do feel like there's maybe enough there to not put it all on Graham Mertz's shoulders because truth of the matter is, he hasn't been great.
Yeah.
Now, could he still be great? He could still be great.
Right.
He hasn't been. Again, that game's noon Eastern time on Fox. We have 5 games on the Big Ten Network this weekend, and in that noon Eastern slot, we've got a chance to see number 6 Penn State, along with Northwestern playing at that time. Conference game coming up mid-afternoon. Illini and Boilers, the Cannon on the line. Got Maryland playing as well. Again, 3:30 Eastern for those games. And then Ohio State and Akron in Big Ten Tailgate going to State College on Saturday. Annie and Brock will get you all the pageantry from on campus. I will be right in this very studio with our crew. It's all Big Ten all morning long. Big Ten Tailgate presented by Tums, 10 Eastern on the Big Ten Network. So, Anthony, here's the big question. Are Annie and Brock going to be watching the best team in the Big Ten in Penn State? Now, I want to say, before I put you on the spot, I was put on the spot this morning. I was on the radio in Birmingham.
Okay.
They said to me, who's the best team in the Big Ten? And I hemmed, I hawed, I vacillated.
Eventually?
I eventually landed at Iowa.
Okay.
So I'm interested to see where you go, but we're going to hold you in suspense.
You'll be allowed back to Iowa City.
Yeah, that's right.
That's good.
It came down to Penn State and Iowa for me. So, but we'll start from number 5. We'll do it Letterman style, as Gennaro likes to call it. So we'll build up. Yeah. Drum roll, please. Where would you go at number 5?
Oh, for me, I start at number 5 with the Michigan Wolverines. I think it's a squad that we haven't seen them really have to face a tough challenge from a capable opponent yet. A lot of us anticipated coming into the season that would be Washington. As we've watched Washington through a few weeks of the season, that is not them, unfortunately, this particular year. But what do you got to do when you face an opponent who's not on your level? You got to pound them. You got to dominate them. Michigan has certainly done that. So I've been really impressed. And frankly, I don't think the passing attack has struggled. It's just been kind of untested as well because Jim Harbaugh has stayed within his DNA of when you can bully someone, just go ahead and bully them. Let the offensive line roll off the ball and make things happen. And talented running backs have gotten it done. And their defense is playing pretty lights out also. So I like Michigan at number 5.
We're going to learn a lot about them here coming up. We'll see with the Rutgers game. Now, Rutgers can be shorthanded in the secondary, as we know. And I don't know that they're incredibly deep there, although I will say that group was pretty good when we were there at camp. We're going to learn a lot about Rutgers as well this week. But then again, Wisconsin, the next week for Michigan. So we'll know here soon just how improved they are. Who's number 4?
Waiting to learn a little more about this squad, too, Ohio State. Because we've seen the combustibility of that passing attack. They can be as explosive as any squad in the country throwing the football. Love the fact that they began to run the football to their capabilities as well, and that the offense was called in that manner, like we just discussed. It would be easy to rank Ohio State higher than this, but the defense continued to struggle despite the rushing attack that was put out there. So we'll see, what happens with Matt Barnes calling the defense and Kerry Combs being upstairs, what that means. But the defense isn't doing enough for me to rank Ohio State higher than 4.
I mean, if someone told you 3 weeks ago you were going to do power rankings September 22nd, and Ohio State was going to be 4th, you wouldn't have believed that. But part of it has been some teams have exceeded expectations. So how about number 3?
I love what's happening in East Lansing, man. With Michigan State, they've been, as far as just the execution, every phase of how they've operated offensively and defensively, you can say they've been the most complete team in the conference so far in execution, and the schedule has been quality also. Now, Northwestern isn't a great team, but you beat a conference foe to open up. I called their game against Youngstown State. That's not a great opponent, but then you go on the road to Miami and make that happen in the heat of South Beach, and the approach Mel Tucker took, and just making sure his team was physically and mentally prepared for that, and the dragging them into the deep water and all those things, man. It's a grand old time in East Lansing. Took him to the woodshed.
We had him on yesterday too. I tried to get him to elaborate on life in the deep water, but he seemed reluctant to.
I call it the Spartan death roll. Is essentially what it comes down to, man. Drag them down.
They're good. I'm not convinced Miami's great either, but Michigan State's really good.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any doubt
everything
about it.
well.
Okay, so it seems like you're in the same boat I was in, Penn State and Iowa, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Where would you go as number 2?
Number 2 is, for me, Iowa right now, because some of the success we've seen from the Hawkeyes has been, that sort of Cobra-like approach to just kind of clinching around opponents, and so any mistake gets taken advantage of. But there are a lot of self-inflicted wounds that have been there, from opponents and mistakes that have been made that Iowa has capitalized on. They got to get more consistent throwing the football. You'd like to see them more explosive. It was great to see them running the ball with more dominance also. And defensively, they do everything really good. You want to see excellence there and consistent excellence on that side of the ball also, and not just sort of reliant on the takeaway. So I got them at number 2.
I get the sense there are 2 long pass completions against Kent State from being number 1
it's a factor.
On your list. Okay, so that means number 1's Penn State. Why?
It is. Man, when you look at what they did to Auburn the other night, and just look at the way they've grown on a weekly basis, and we're seeing Sean Clifford, the version of him that I really thought we would see last year. I thought we would see that emergence, that ascension of Sean Clifford into one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten, maybe one of the best in America last season. It wasn't there for a variety of reasons, but now we're seeing that. We're seeing kind of the big picture of what Sean Clifford can become. And with that, I think it will end up enhancing how they can run the football. Penn State's rushing attack seems to get better as the year goes on, like every season. But they got talent at running back. You've seen that. The defense is as good as any out there. I love everything that they have available, and the fact that they're getting better during the year.
Not sure it's a great run blocking O-line. That would be the issue for me. So, the running back room is deep. Are they good enough in run blocking? We'll see. The reason I've vacillated, the reason I eventually went with Iowa, kind of my rationale was, I don't know how much Penn State won the Wisconsin game as Wisconsin lost it.
Yeah.
And they made some unforced errors in the red zone. Again, I think they're really good. I think you make an argument.
Better team in week 3 than they were in week 1.
Ohio State went on the road for its conference opener on Sunday afternoon, knocked off Maryland 2-1. Looked like the game would likely head to overtime, but the Buckeyes pulled it out. A goal in the 89th minute. Dramatic finish to win it for OSU. They're 6-3 on the year, a team that played in the NCAA tournament last spring. And as we head to our big interview, very excited to have Izzy Rodriguez, All-American defender, in fact, the Big Ten Defender of the Year last year, joining us. Big home opener coming up against Minnesota tomorrow. Izzy, I want to start with this. We mentioned conference play has started, and you guys got that win against the Terps. You played a really challenging non-conference schedule. I mean, 4 ranked teams in the non-conference. How do you feel like that prepared you for starting conference play?
Yeah, so the teams we played were all super tough, and they all played different systems, and I think they exposed us in ways that are going to help us once we get into conference play, like we started now, but kind of just showed us what we needed to work on, and playing against somebody that tough showed us that we can compete with them, and we were close a lot of the times, but we just needed to put it away, and I think that'll help us in the future with not only conference play, but hopefully in the tournament once we get there.
I was talking a minute ago about how good volleyball is in this league. Soccer's really good, and we know that Penn State is kind of perennially the team that people pick, and certainly Rutgers and Michigan. You guys are very much in that mix. I mentioned you were an NCAA tournament team a year ago. Give us a sense of how you see this league shaping up this year competitively.
Yeah, this year it's super competitive. I think every team is really bringing something new, and they're getting better and better. But you never know what's going to happen during our conference play, and I think that's one of the best things about the Big Ten is every game is super competitive, and you can't take anyone lightly. I would like to think that us Buckeyes are going to be at the top of that, but we got to take it one game at a time, and that starts with Minnesota this Thursday. So super excited about that.
This is your 5th year playing, and we all know how strange college sports were a year ago. You guys did play a spring season. As I mentioned, not only did you played well. You made it to the NCAA tournament. But then you had the option, right, of this extra season, which you would not have otherwise had were it not for COVID. What ultimately made you decide to stay?
I think the program here, the culture here is fantastic, and I wasn't really ready to give it up yet. Our team, our coaches, I didn't want to leave, and overall I think we have a really good chance of being a great team this year, just like we were last year, and hopefully get even further. But I wasn't ready to leave Ohio State and the Buckeyes and our team without a little bit more success.
I like the notion of staying in college a little longer. I think we all wish we would have had the opportunity to do that. It's wonderful.
For sure.
That being said, you've got incredible opportunities professionally. We'll get to that in a second based on your academic record. But as a soccer player, I mean, you've played on the U20 national team, so you're in that national team pool. There's a burgeoning women's professional league, which is getting more and more successful, and I think it's getting more and more publicity. It's been really fun to watch that grow. So what's next for you soccer-wise?
Yeah, so I'd love to enter the draft come January and hopefully get drafted in the NWSL. Also totally open to looking overseas, but first option would be definitely here, and I'm hoping to compete to get at that higher level and stay in that national team pool as well. But I definitely want to keep playing soccer and keep that in my wheelhouse as well. So looking forward to that.
Well, as good as you've been on the soccer field, you've been just as good in the classroom. You were named a Scholar All-American last year, a 3.75 GPA in business finance. So when that soccer career comes to an end, which we know it will at some point, hopefully later rather than sooner, what do you want to do with that?
I did get a chance to intern with JP Morgan the summer of 2020. It was a little weird because of COVID, but I really enjoyed that. So kind of looking into those options. I'm kind of open to a lot of things, not super focused on one area, but that'll be something I'll have to test out as the time comes, see what I'm interested in, see what I'm not interested in.
Izzy, one last thing I wanted to ask you about. This is Hispanic Heritage Month. Tell me the role that your Hispanic heritage plays in your life.
Yeah, so I have some Hispanic heritage on my dad's side, and I think it's a great time this month to kind of just remember who you are and celebrate the Hispanic culture and recognize the successes that Hispanic people have had and just the diversity even within our team. I think we celebrate that a lot and unite it, and it's really awesome.
Well, Izzy, you've been awesome as well. Really fun to get a chance to catch up with you. Best of luck here with that home opener coming up tomorrow, and best of luck the rest of the season. Thanks so much for spending a few minutes with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, you take care.
Yep.